My parents stole my $42,000 college fund. I worked 2 jobs for 4 years. But when they showed up at my door demanding a second chance, my friend exposed them in front of everyone. And they were left broken. I'm 26 years old. I work in digital marketing, and about a month ago, I finally had to threaten my own parents with a restraining order. Sounds crazy, I know. But after everything that happened, it was either that or keep living in fear that they'd show up at my door at any moment. The thing is, this didn't start a month ago. Not even a year ago. This goes back years. Since I was like 17 or 18. And I need to tell this whole story because basically nobody understands why I cut contact with my family. And honestly, I'm tired of being made to feel like I'm the bad guy here. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I still thought my parents were normal people with normal problems. My dad, Gregory, was a corporate lawyer, worked at a big firm in the city, made good money, and my mom, Diane, sold real estate. She was doing pretty well too. We lived in a nice house. We weren't rich, but we didn't lack anything either. I mean, it was a comfortable upper middle class life. You know what? Mean? I was an only child. So all the attention was on me, for better or worse. I grew up thinking I was lucky, that my parents gave me everything. But looking back, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there from the start. My grandfather, Thomas, my dad's father, was always my favorite person in the family. When I was born, he opened a college savings fund for me. He told me all the time when I was a kid, "Mija, this is so you can go to whatever university you want, so you never depend on anyone, so you can be free." Those were his exact words, "so you can be free." He died when I was 14, lung cancer. It was horrible. But before he died, he made sure that fund was in my name, with my parents as custodians until I turned 18. There was like $45,000 in there. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover a big part of State University. Or at least that's what I thought. Things started getting weird during my senior year of high school. I was 17, applying to colleges, getting good grades, working part-time at a coffee shop on weekends to have my own money, being a responsible teenager. And suddenly my dad lost his job. He didn't quit. He got fired. Something related to a conflict of interest and a client. They never really explained what happened, but basically his name got tarnished in the local legal industry. Like 2 months later, my mom also lost her job at the real estate agency, supposedly because of staff cuts. But then I found out she'd had problems with falsifying some documents or something. I'm not completely sure of the details because they were never honest with me about anything. The house got super tense. My parents started fighting all the time, yelling at each other about money, about bills, about whose fault everything was. I tried to stay out of it, lock myself in my room to study, because I had to keep my grades high for scholarships. It was my only way out of that house. I felt it in my bones, and I did it. I got an almost full academic scholarship to a state university like 2 hours from home. It wasn't my first choice, but it was good, and the scholarship covered almost everything except like $8,000 a year between housing and books and stuff like that. When I told them I'd gotten the scholarship, my parents acted weird. Instead of being proud or happy, my mom started with, "Well, but you still need money for the rest, and how are you going to pay for that?" And I told her, "Well, with Grandpa Thomas's fund, that's what it's for." And that's when I saw that look between them. That look that tells you something is very wrong. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk about that." Turns out. And I found this out like a week before graduating high school. They had drained almost all of the fund. There was like $3,000 left of the original $45,000. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what they were telling me. I asked them how, why, and my dad started with excuses about the mortgage, debts, that they had no other choice, that it was only temporary, that they were going to pay me back. My mom was crying, saying she was so sorry, but that I didn't understand how hard it had been for them. And I'm standing there thinking, Grandpa left that money for me. It was my future, and you stole it. Because that's what it was, theft. They didn't ask my permission, didn't consult me about anything, just took it like it was theirs. That night, I cried myself to sleep. And the next day, I started making plans to get out of that house as fast as possible. I graduated high school, turned 18 like 2 weeks later, and I left. I packed everything I could in my old car, a 2005 Honda Civic that I'd paid for myself with my job at the coffee shop, and moved into a shared room near the university with 2 other students. My parents tried to stop me. My mom crying about how could I do this to them, that I was ungrateful, that after everything they'd done for me, this was how I repaid them. But I didn't believe anything they said anymore. The first few years of college were brutal. I'm not going to lie. I worked 2 jobs, one at the campus library during the day and another at a restaurant in the evenings and weekends. I slept like 5 hours a day, lived on ramen and whatever I could get free at campus events, and basically had no social life. But I kept my grades high, because I wasn't going to let all that effort go to waste. My parents called me sometimes. It was always the same thing. They apologized, said things were getting better, asked if we could see each other, but they never mentioned giving me the money back. So I kept them at a distance. I'd answer their messages occasionally, so they wouldn't go crazy, but I didn't see them in person even once during those 4 years. I graduated with honors, got an amazing job at a digital marketing company in another state. They offered me $55,000 a year to start plus benefits, and I moved like 6 hours from where I grew up. I finally felt like I was building my own life, you know? I rented a small but nice apartment, started dating a guy named Ethan, who I met at work, made new friends, and for the first time in years I felt free, like my grandpa used to say. And for almost 2 years I had no contact with my parents beyond a generic text message at Christmas or on my birthday. And then, like 6 months ago, I got a message from my mom. It was long, like paragraphs and paragraphs about how they'd been thinking about me, how it hurt them not to be part of my life, and that they wanted to reconnect. It said they had a surprise for me, a gift, and asked if they could come visit me. I read that message like 5 times, trying to decide what to do. Part of me, that stupid part that still wants to believe your parents can change, considered saying yes. But the smarter part, the one that kept me afloat all those years, told me no, that this was some kind of trap. I wrote back saying, no, that it wasn't ready to see them, that I appreciated the gesture, but needed more time. I thought that would be enough, that they'd understand and leave me alone. But instead, the messages from other family members started. My Aunt Rebecca, my mom's sister, wrote to me saying my parents had really changed, that they'd been in therapy, that they just wanted to fix things. A second cousin on my dad's side, Kevin, sent me a long message, basically calling me selfish and saying family was the most important thing. People I hadn't talked to in years suddenly had opinions about my relationship with my parents. What bothered me wasn't just that they were pressuring me, but that clearly my parents had told them their version of the story, the version where they were the victims, and I was the cruel daughter who'd abandoned them for no reason. Nobody knew they'd stolen $42,000 from me. Nobody knew what it was really like living in that house when they lost their jobs and became completely different people. Nobody knew shit about what I'd been through. My Aunt Rebecca was the most persistent. She'd call me and send messages telling me to just listen to my parents, that the surprise they had for me was important, that it was going to change everything. Finally, after like 2 weeks of this, I wrote back to my aunt and said, okay, what's the surprise? You tell me, and if it's worth it, I'll consider talking to them. And she told me my parents had been saving money, that they had a trust fund with $25,000 they wanted to give me as an apology for the college fund thing, that they'd been in therapy for a year working on their issues, that they understood they'd failed me, and that this was their way of starting to make it up, $25,000. It wasn't the $42,000 they stole from me, but it was an attempt to fix things. I stared at my aunt's message for like an hour, deciding what to do. I talked to Ethan, my boyfriend, and he told me to do what felt right, but to be careful, not to let myself be manipulated. I talked to my best friend Melissa, who knows the whole story, and she basically told me not to trust them, that if they really wanted to make it up to me, they'd send the money with no conditions, instead of using it as bait to force me to see them. In the end, I decided I was going to set clear boundaries. I sent them an email, not a text message, but a formal email, telling them I appreciated the gesture of the trust fund, but wasn't ready to see them in person. I told them that if they really wanted to reconnect, we'd have to do it slowly, starting with emails or scheduled video calls, not surprise visits. I told them I needed them to respect my boundaries and my space, and that if they couldn't do that, then there was no way we could have a relationship. The response I got was revealing. My dad answered, not my mom, and he was furious. The email was long and basically said I was ungrateful, that they were trying to do the right thing and I was spitting in their face, that I couldn't ask them to grovel to get back into my life. It said the problem was that I'd become too independent, that I thought I was better than them now, that I had a good job and a life in another state. It ended saying that if I didn't want to be part of the family, then not to expect anything from them, not the trust fund or anything else. I read that email and felt a mix of relief and rage. You know what I mean? Relief, because it confirmed they hadn't changed at all, that this whole trust fund and therapy thing was just another way to try to control me, to make me feel guilty. So I'd come back into their lives on their terms. And rage because, seriously, who says that to their daughter? Who uses money as manipulation and then gets angry when it doesn't work? I deleted the email and decided that was it, that I wasn't going to respond anymore, that they were going to have to accept that I was moving on with my life, without them. But it didn't end. 2 days later, I got a text message from a number I didn't know, saying I was an idiot if I thought I could just ignore my family, that they were going to find a way to talk to me whether I wanted it or not. The message scared me quite a bit, I admit, because it sounded kind of threatening, you know. I showed Ethan and he told me to report the number, to block everything, that if it kept happening we should consider talking to the police. I blocked the number and made all my social media private, something I should have done years ago but never thought my own parents would stalk me like that. But it turns out I wasn't careful enough because somehow my parents found my Instagram. They started following me from new accounts, and through my photos, they managed to figure out more or less where I lived. I didn't post my address or anything obvious, but there were photos of my apartment, of the view from my window, of the coffee shop on my street corner, enough clues for someone who was really looking. Like a week after that threatening text message, Ethan was leaving the apartment to go to work and saw my dad in the parking lot, walking between the cars like he was looking for something. I mean, looking for me. Ethan took a picture of him and sent it to me right away, and I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. My dad was there, 6 hours from where he lived, at my building, without warning, without permission, basically stalking me. I called the building management office and explained the situation, gave them my parents' names, and told them under no circumstances should they give them access to the building or information about me. Then I sent a text message to my dad, to the number I'd already blocked but unblocked just for this, telling him that if he showed up at my building again uninvited, I was going to call the police. That this was harassment. That he was violating my boundaries in the most serious way possible. My mom answered, not my dad, saying I was overreacting. That my dad just wanted to talk to me. That she couldn't understand why I was being so cruel to them. I told her that what was cruel was stealing my college money. What was cruel was using a trust fund as manipulation. What was cruel was showing up at my home without permission after I explicitly asked them not to. I told her that if they didn't stop contacting me, looking for me, stalking me, I was going to get a restraining order, and I blocked their numbers again. Ethan and I decided it wasn't safe to stay in that apartment. Not with my parents knowing where I lived and clearly willing to show up whenever they wanted. I looked into breaking the lease, explained the situation to the landlord, and fortunately, he was understanding and let us leave paying only 1 extra month as a penalty. We found another apartment in another neighborhood, more secure, with a doorman and cameras, and I made sure not to post absolutely anything on social media that could give clues about where we were. Ethan even officially moved in with me. Something we'd been considering, but this accelerated. Like so I'd never be alone if something happened. Like 2 months passed without incidents. I started to relax a bit, to think that maybe my parents had finally gotten the message. And then something happened that I didn't expect at all. My friend Melissa, who lives relatively close to where I grew up, went to a family event, a kind of summer gathering of her extended family. And it turns out there's a connection between our families, like a cousin of hers is married to a cousin of mine or something. I never knew exactly how, but our families know each other. My parents were at that event. Melissa told me that at some point in the afternoon someone mentioned my name, asking how I was, what I was doing, and my mom started with her victim story, saying I'd abandoned them, that they didn't know why, that they'd tried everything to reconnect, but I cruelly rejected them. And Melissa, bless her, couldn't stay quiet. She stood up in front of everyone and said, "Are you going to stop lying, or do I tell them the truth? That you stole your daughter's college fund, that you harassed her until she had to move, that you're basically stalking her." She told me there was a horrible silence, that my parents turned red, that my dad tried to say something about how things were more complicated than they seemed, but Melissa didn't let him talk. She kept going, saying everything. How I had to work 2 jobs during college, how I didn't see them for years because they'd betrayed me, and how recently they'd shown up at my building after I explicitly asked them not to. She said half the people there didn't know what to say, that some relatives left the event early, clearly uncomfortable, and that my parents also left quickly, humiliated. When Melissa told me all this on the phone, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. On one hand, I felt bad that she'd had to confront my parents for me, that now there was probably going to be family drama and gossip. But on the other hand, I felt kind of vindicated, you know? Like finally someone had said out loud what I'd been carrying alone for years, like the truth was finally out there and my parents couldn't hide behind their victim narrative. Melissa told me she didn't regret it, that someone had to say it, that she was sick of seeing people like my parents get away with this kind of behavior. After that, I started getting messages from other relatives, people who'd never contacted me before or who'd stopped talking to me when I cut contact with my parents. Some apologized for believing my parents' version without asking for my side. Others told me they'd always suspected something wasn't right, but didn't know what exactly. Even my Aunt Rebecca, the one who'd pressured me so much to talk to my parents, sent me a message saying she didn't know the whole story, that my parents had lied to her about many things, and that she understood why I'd cut contact. My parents were basically socially isolated after that. People in their community started seeing them differently, treating them differently, because the behavior Melissa had exposed wasn't just about stealing money, it was about manipulation, harassment, boundary violations, things people consider serious and concerning. My dad, who'd always been like the guy who thought he was respected in his community despite having lost his job, suddenly was seen as the guy who stole from his own daughter. My mom, who was always in church groups and book clubs, suddenly found many doors closing on her. I sent them one last email, like 2 weeks after the incident at the family event. I told them what Melissa had done wasn't cruelty, it was truth, and that if they couldn't accept the truth of how they'd treated their own daughter, then we had nothing more to say to each other. I told them that the next time they contacted me, the next time they showed up near where I lived, the next time they tried to manipulate relatives to pressure me, I was going to file a formal restraining order. I gave them a specific list of things they shouldn't do. Contact me directly, contact me through third parties, show up at my workplace or residence, post about me on social media, try to find information about me through my friends or acquaintances. I told them this was their last warning. My mom answered, a short email that basically said she couldn't believe her own daughter was threatening them with legal action, that they'd made mistakes but I was taking this too far, that someday I was going to regret how I'd treated them. It ended with, we hope you find peace and happiness, but don't expect us to keep begging you to be part of our lives. I didn't answer them. I simply saved the email as evidence in case I needed that restraining order eventually. It's been like 6 weeks since that last email and I haven't heard anything from them. No messages, no appearances, no pressure from other relatives. I don't know if they finally got it or if they just gave up, but honestly, I don't care what the reason is as long as they leave me alone. Ethan and I are doing well in our new apartment. My job is going amazing. They just gave me a raise and a promotion. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. I still have bad days. Days where I feel guilty about how all this ended. Where I wonder if I should have handled things differently. If I should have given them another chance when they mentioned the trust fund and therapy. But then I remember that email from my dad. The one that called me ungrateful and said I'd become too independent. And I remember that you can't have a healthy relationship with people who see you as their possession, instead of as a person. I remember the $42,000 they're never going to give me back. The years I spent working 2 jobs while they went on with their lives without any real remorse, and I realize I did the right thing. Last week, Melissa came to visit me. She stayed the weekend, and we went to dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate my promotion. She told me she was proud of me, not just for the job, but for everything, for staying firm, for setting boundaries, for not letting myself be manipulated back into a toxic situation. And while we were there, eating and laughing and talking about future plans, I realized this is what my grandpa Thomas wanted when he put that money for my education. Not just for me to go to college, but to be free, to build my own life, not to depend on anyone who could use that dependence to control me. And even though the path was much harder than it should have been, I did it. I'm free. And that's enough for now.